So in this session, we're going to be covering drives, T-10, everyone in? Hello, hello, hello. Anyone?
Yes.
Okie dokie. Thank you. Thank you very much, man. Okay. So let's go to slide here 3. The purpose is ultimate goal to describe the types and characteristics of different storage devices, compare and contrast connections of these devices and their purpose, explain the purpose and types of RAID. No, that's not the one to kill the insects. Describe the process of installing storage devices and identify the common hard drive problems. And
I can't see your screen.
Thank you very much, man. Okay, we're going now to slide 4. Name the types of drive that you know.
Hard drive, SSDs.
Okay. Go ahead. Fill it out there. It's on slide 3.
Oh.
I mean 4, sorry. My fault. Let's see you put it there. We're on slide 4. Okay. A lot of you know them, huh? There's a lot of them out there. They're very much, those are the main ones out there, right? Okay. Proceeding to slide 5. So drives overall are data devices used to record, hold, and or process information. They're not like RAM chips here. Well, some of them nowadays are, but for the purpose of their job, they are to hold information long term. Not like the RAM or the CPU, where it is just basically constantly refreshing. There is parts of it is syncing, and obviously those will be your Word documents or anything that you're opening up, which is part of that processing process where there's stuff being stored there. There's optical drives, hard drives. There's many different also tape drives out there to store information. So slide 6, the main different types of drives, as I stated, you have your optical, your hard drives or HDD, which have like a read and write mechanisms, the platters, mechanical parts in it. Solid state drives don't have any of those parts, but they use obviously a more sophisticated chips to store the information. You have your hybrid drives, which have both the SSD and the HDD, the solid state and the hard drives, the normal hard drives split. You got the tape drives, and those are using magnetics type. Looks like the old tapes from the 80s, but obviously this is the tape. It looks like that, but physical form is not. Using a magnetic strip to be able to record the information. Slide 7. Your common optical drives and capacities. You have your CDRs, RWs. You have your DVDRs, RWs, your pluses and RWs. All those are the variances that you have here. Depending on the type, you have your double layered, single layered. Double layered means that's both sides versus single layer, one side. Questions? Doubts? Obviously, not all of them are always recordable, but these are the mediums that are. These are the read and writes, the R and the RW. You have the read and write. Read and write, and the different sizes. Blu-ray, same thing, read and write.
optical drives means CDs and DVDs, right?
Exactly. CD,
Or
all optical, all the ones that have the laser reader, correct. The spinning CD. Could be a CD or a DVD. Those are all optical drives. Slide 8. Now your hard drive. This here is a little bit more complex. You have your platters or individual disks where data is being stored in actual sequential tracks, sectors, and cylinders to keep it organized. Now, here's your plate, right? So this spindle here, this thing is in the middle. So here's the hole where this guy comes in here. You can pretend it's an old record player. You have your head here with the needle and the actuator arm on the axis all the way down here in the bottom. There's an actuator that moves the arm across the whole plate. So that goes up and down, just like a record player. Same concept. So the actuator has a little motor in here that moves the arm back and forth to its position. That's how it, and then it has little readers on the head. Depending on the type of drive, some of them have readers on both sides, some of them only have one, but I believe the majority of them have the both, one on each side. Nowadays, I haven't seen any of them. Matter of fact, I remember the old ones, which had, if they said it that they had 5 heads or 16 heads, it had actually that many. The questions or doubts on the different parts. On the end over here, on the outside, we have the IDE connector. So the cable will come in here, and if you notice, it has a little slot to make sure we don't get it wrong. It tells you exactly where the slot is and which way to face it. You have your jumper block and your power connector. On the disc here, this picture, we'll see that this is a track. So that area, confined in that area, that would be the track. And this little section is what we call a sector. That is a sector of the drive, that little part. We need to understand this because there's going to be things that we need to understand and how it writes things onto the drive and what it does. Questions or doubts on a hard drive and its anatomy? Slide 9. Identify the components inside the hard drive. So what do we believe this is here? Anybody?
I'm trying to figure out how to put stuff here.
It doesn't let you draw in there?
It's a little finicky for me.
No? Yeah. But can you identify it? How's that? Can we try to identify it? Let's start with this line here in the, I believe I have the capabilities of annotating. What do we have here? Right here. This guy here is going to this line here. The arm. What's that?
The actuator arm.
That is correct. The actuator arm. What do we call this guy back here? In other words, this here. Can I draw? Please. Thank you. This guy here. What do we call this guy?
Actuator axis.
This
That
one
is
here.
the actuator.
That
That's
will
the
be the
actuator.
axis. This is the actuator, correct? And that was the axis.
The access? Is that what you said?
The axis. That's
Oh,
where
axis.
this little circle is where it pivots from the arm. So that's the actuator
Yeah.
arm. The one all the way back here is the actuator. And this little circle here is the actuator axis. What's this guy in the center of the whole little record?
A spindle?
That's correct. That would be the spindle. What's here on the tip of the actuator arm?
That's the transponder, the head.
Okay.
It's
And
said
what's
it
this guy over here called? The big
The platters something, right?
platters, platers. I don't know, everybody likes to pronounce potato, however you want to pronounce that. But yes, that would be it. Oh, this is great. So let me go back to okay. Kept this stuff. All right. Slide 10. So as we stated, that's the actuator arm. We have the read-write head here at the tip. We have the spindle in the center. We have a plater or platter here, which is the actual record or disk, however you want to state this is. We have the axis where it pivots from. The actuator motor is back here. Any questions?
What's some many PCBs? Something.
Main PCB. Good question. Anyone know what a main PCB is?
Can't say I do.
Anyone? Nobody?
Printed circuit board. What
That's
the PCBs stands for.
Correct. Printed circuit board. So knowing those words, what do we think it is? Knowing that it's a printed circuit board, what can we imagine that is on a hard drive? Okay. On the other side of these drives, you guys can see, they actually have circuitry. In other words, like a little motherboard, you could say for itself. And that's the PCB
Electricity
that's
flow.
on the other side of the hard drive. If you flip it over or if you open it, you'll see that it has the little circuitry, and that all connects to the outside where all your IDE and your power and your jumpers are. That's the next part that they're alluding to there in the picture.
So that's how it receives all this data.
Yeah, it has a circuit board to be able to control the drive and make sure everything's going back and forth and transfer data, zeros and ones. Good question. Any other questions? Next slide, 11. Spindle or rotation speed is measured in RPMs or revolutions per minute. The faster, obviously, the spindle, the faster you can retrieve your data. Pretty self-explanatory. We have different sizes. We have the small size for laptops of 2.5, 3.5, usually for desktops, and for low-end laptops, usually have 1.8 or some other type of equipment. Be careful with those low-end ones, because then now you can't just simply go and replace easily. You have to make sure the right size. Slide 12. Your SSDs. This one here is a little bit sometimes more complex for people to understand, get confused, but it's basically as simple as I can put it. You can compare it to being a USB stick that they created to be able to save everything, but it can save it without having power. It's non-volatile memory chips. So it doesn't have any moving parts. It's obviously more expensive, and it's less susceptible to shock. So these discs, we said they have these little readers, right? So imagine when you drop it and all these times, they have a motor, they have moving parts, you drop it, bam. That's when it's moving, it's gonna scratch the disc, just like in old discs. If anybody ever had a record player, it's just gonna start skipping. Can't read that, there goes a frog. Can't read that section. Next slide is 13. You have your flash drive, you have your CF drives. That's the different type of solid state ones that have come out. Secure digital is your SDs and your different sizes. I'm not gonna get in and read every part here. I'm pretty sure you guys know what flash drives are, where compact flash. You've seen these. If not, you will need to recognize these different type of solid state drives. Next one is slide 14 is the actual new and greatest ones are the hard drives. Your solid state drives are in the inside that contain information. No weight for the platers to spin anymore. They come in various sizes also. And the max capacity, at least in 2015, was 16 terabytes. I believe it's much more right now. Obviously, there's different types of connectors to it. You have your SATA, you have your PCIEs, and your SCSIs, depending on the interface is what gives you the capabilities of being able to connect and speed. Any questions on your hard drive itself? So then you have the embedded multimedia controllers. Those are the eMMCs. These are a type of flash memory that is slower than the solid state, but is also obviously cheaper. Often used now in your tablets and your smartphones. These are the things that they're using. That's how they can be able to fit that thing in there. It's not a hard drive. It's usually these little things that are in there to be able to fit it and make it work as a hard drive. It's not the old hard drive is what I want to say. It's a solid state drive, and they're called the embedded multimedia controllers. Any questions, doubt? Slide 15. We have here the compact and secure digital examples, all the different flavors and sizes with their labels. Unfortunately, we need to try to figure out which one's which and try to memorize which one's which. From my understanding, they will be testing you on seeing if you can recognize, without the labels, the sizes. So they'll put, excuse me, they'll put 3 of these pictures or 4 of these pictures, and you need to be able to recognize what type of compact flash or secure digital examples are. Questions or doubts? All right, continue to the next slide, 16. You have your external card readers, basically a device that allows you to read your SDs. I'm pretty sure you guys maybe had this not too long ago, or maybe you still have these to be able to use it to connect to your computer. It'll let you do various forms of sizes and flavors of these devices, be it if it's an XD size or SD, any of these different types, depending on what your need is. Usually you have this if you have those cameras and you want to be able to flip-flop between different of those SD cards or micro SD cards, and you don't want to be connecting your camera, you just want to be able to go in and out, because sometimes that connection through USB is so slow, you rather just do it through here. Or you could be storing files or whatever it is that you're storing on these little devices. Any questions? Slide 16. Slide 17. Here is examples of solid state drives. Yes, this is what it would look like inside your computer. If it was inside your computer, you'll see that this one goes actually as in the expansion bus, where you would actually connect it to the bus, versus this one would be just the actual drive, what it looks like inside with its various connectors. So it would have this shell here. Then you also have these here that look like little memory sticks that would also be onto the motherboard itself. These are actual drives, example. Right. Slide 18. So your hybrid drives have the traditional hard drive and some type of SSD. Your dual hybrids usually contain, obviously, the SSD for the information that is going to be less frequently used would be for the actual hard drive. So everything that I'm maybe working now, for instance, I have a document that I'm working on, it will most likely transfer to there to be working on it while it's syncing, so that you could have that performance on the given things. Sometimes people dedicate maybe just the actual programs and or OS to the solid state, and then put the long-term files in their hard drives. That's usually what a lot of people do. So the program will be installed on that SSD, so it could be running there, and when I open those files, it'll be using it that side. I'll obviously be syncing with my regular side of the hard drive, but it will be spinning in there with the program. Any questions on the hybrid? All right, next one, tape drives, slide 19. Your tape drives are obviously installed internally or externally. They can be either which one. They use any of them, usually on servers. They're to hold a lot of data long term. This is not something that you would put on your computer. Usually, like I said, it's more in terms of long-term external storage for a given server. I've seen up to tape sets of 30 days or 30 cycles, basically. So you have the server, every single day there's a backup, you'll have up to 30 days of the information. Any questions?
How much data can they typically hold? I'm curious.
Tape drives nowadays, it all depends on the model and make that you get. But as for the max, we could look that up. Let's see, tape drive max. If that's true, 330 terabytes of data from IBM and Sony.
Oh, that's a lot more. I thought it would hold that much.
Yep. You'd be surprised how many ones and zeros can fit in such little space now with these technologies that we have. It's amazing. Good questions. Any other questions? So the internal ones will have SATA, PATA connectors or SCSI connectors, and the externals will have USB, firewall, or eSATA. It's the same flavor as SATA. The only thing is it's an external SATA. How to connect drives in your PC. We're in slide 20. Every drive has an interface that allows the drive to exchange data with your motherboard. The connection can be internal or external depending on the drive. Each internal interface is its own connectors. Slide 21. So your internal ones is the IDEs, your PATAs, your SATAs, your SCSIs. Your externals, as I stated a second ago, was the eSATAs, USB, firewall, and Ethernet, covered in future sessions. Slide 22. Your IDEs terminology means integrated drive electronics. We need to be able to eventually recognize what they look like. The PATA is a parallel advanced technology attachment. Drives send data in parallel on a 40 or 80 wire cabled ribbon. The maximum is 18 inches. Ultimately, the major difference is that your drives have obviously better performance depending on the type of connector. Your AT3s introduce a self-monitoring reporting, which they call the SMART, obviously, to track errors and and error conditions in a drive. And these types of connectors can be used with a CD-ROM, a DVD, a zip drive, a hard drive, usually. The SATA would be for the more modern ones. So the IDE PATA is for the older types of drives. Questions or doubts?
What's a zip drive? Is
I'm
that
sorry?
archiving?
I'm sorry? I can't hear you.
What is a zip drive? Is that an actual drive or a compression file?
A zip drive, good question. I love it. Zip drive is actually a type of tape drive. So if you Google zip drive, let me over here. Zip drive, it's a manufacturer of type of drives. See? So this is usually external. The cable goes to the computer and you put the cartridge in there.
Oh, so it's a floppy disk. Kinda?
More or
I meant,
less, yeah, it's a removable floppy disk type, but it's much more sophisticated. It can store much more information than a floppy. Yes.
okay. I'll just call it zip drive.
Think about it like a floppy disk, but it's a floppy disk can't reach, but it is using the floppy disk storage system. It obviously has this capability, but it's not the 3.5 cartridge. That's why I'll make sure, because the old floppy drive, that's not, you can't use those. Oh, it looks like there's no, guess no, there we go, there we go, yeah, there we go. There's a 3.5 and there's a 5.25. Those are not used anymore. I just want to make sure we're both.
Still expensive though.
That's a ripoff, yeah. You got to be pretty dumb to go and buy that. I mean, I don't even know why you would have a computer with that, because obviously you can't fit anything in it. Questions, doubts? All right. So next slide is 23. So your IDE cables. So this is the back of a hard drive. You'll see there the actual board that we were saying on the bottom. You have your connectors there and your power. And now in the center, you see the options for jumpers. This is used in all of the old hard drives. You have the different types of wires. So you have an 80 wire and a 40 wire. So if I had a slave with his master, I would have to basically set the drives to be either or. This is to be able to extend the capacity limits of one hard drive and mimic, out of two, I'm going to make one big hard drive. Your jumpers are there, and the numbers associated are 1 through 8. So usually the manufacturers, a lot of them have it this way. It's not a must, but the majority of them have it like this, where the first jumper here is setting it for master / or single. All right. And next one here is I take off all, and that drive becomes a slave. So I need to be careful when I'm connecting these cables and how I'm connecting it, so it knows, sorry, the connectors, the jumper block, so it knows which one's a master and which one's a slave. That's how they're able to talk to each other and where to send on an 80 wire versus the 40 wire. On one end of this cable, you're going to have the connector. In the center, you'll have a part there just exactly like the connector. And then the other section is going straight into the motherboard. Again, with that connector. Usually at one point, you have the 80 wire versus the 40 wire, depending who's going to who. Questions? Doubts?
I have a question. Is this why you can usually only have 4 drives in a ATA technology for PATA?
Yes, because you have usually 2 spots on the board, and then you can only stretch to 4 drives. That is correct. That's the usual thing that happens. But you only have 2 IDE slots, on the motherboard, and then the farthest you can go is to 4 drives. Questions? Anyone else? All right, next slide, 24. SATA. It's an 88 ATA drive using serial transmission opposed to parallel. Does anybody know what's the difference between serial and parallel?
I do.
Okay.
Want me to explain?
Yes, feel free, please.
Yeah, parallel means that they have all their own individual wires. Serial is that they're actually point to point. They're actually sharing the circuitry.
Oh, close to the explanation. The parallel means that all the wires transmit and receive, can transmit and receive at the same time. That's what in this technology, that's what they're talking about. Is basically that all wires can transmit at the same time, versus in serial, one at a time can only talk. So it goes like that in motion in serial. So these drives, compared to the other ones, the PATA, is all cables are transmitting and receiving at the same time. That's the major difference of SATA and PATA. Questions so far or doubts on the variants? So the SATA is usually made on the new ones. You have different revisions. You have the 1, 2s, and 3s. Usually the maximum 1 meter is the maximum on the cable. It's smaller, obviously, than the PATA. It only has 7 wires. You have your SATA Express, your 3.2s. Obviously, these are also going, some of them directly to the PCIe, as we showed, directly towards the PCIe bus, which is the latest and greatest, fastest towards the North Bridge, right? It requires a motherboard, obviously, that's capable with SATA E support. If it's not able, then you're not going to be able to do that. So you need always to be careful what you're purchasing. Next slide, we have on slide 25, all of different revisions and the speeds. Obviously, the latest and greatest goes 6 gigabytes versus the first one was 1. That's the major difference. A lot of the new ones that I'm aware of are pretty much on the 3X or even more. But for the purpose, I think it's 3X. I haven't seen anything bigger, but I could be wrong. I really haven't purchased any lately. Questions or doubts on the rates? Obviously, each one has its own requirements of motherboard. Slide 26, we can see here the actual connector, the SATA. We have the actual power connector on the left. You have the middle one, the data connector. They're both L-shaped. Make it sure that, or 7, depending on which way you want to look at it, making sure that we don't get confused in how to connect it. You still have the jumper bank set as factory. Still have the capabilities that if you want to create slaves and stuff like that, you still do it. It's up to you. Usually it's not necessary, but if you really want it and you're running out of space on a given server or something that you're working with, you could always do it. Questions on 26 before we proceed to 27. Here now, these are the SCSI ones. These are the small computer system interface standards. This was actually before the SATA SCSI had come out. All the primary servers usually have this. It supports 7 or 15 devices at a time. Obviously, it provides better performance than ATA standards. These, again, are much more faster and better performance. You'll see these also in maybe in the Plantronics here, the ones on the actual printers, your scanners, and or drives. You've probably seen these connectors. Questions on the connector and what it looks like? Next is the eSATA. Again, these are connectors for drives and what they look like. This is the external one and the cable for it. Same exact function as a SATA. The only variance here is that now the cable can be 2 meters long versus in the other one, it was basically much shorter. I think it was a meter, if that was correct, or less. Was it 3 feet? Anybody remember?
SATA is 1 meter, and I
1
know
meter.
the
Yeah, one,
external one is 2 meters.
3 meters, yeah. 2 meters. Questions? So usually these are for the drives that you're gonna have external if you wanna have an external drive and be able to take it in and out from different locations. So can we identify these type of drives? Can anybody give me what type is one?
SSDs.
Okay, good. Number two?
Optical drive.
Yeah. Number three?
Hard drive.
That's a hard drive.
Yeah. Correct. Thank you. Slide 30. Actually, yeah. Can we identify here the actual connectors? Can somebody give me the connectors there on one?
It looks like a SATA.
Okay, everyone agree? Number one, SATA?
Yeah.
Yes, no, maybe so, please. Anyone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Still gotta.
Right, about
Stuff to-
number two.
SATA. A ribbon.
Yeah, what type of connector though am I going to?
IDE.
That is correct. About number three.
Uh,
Ethernet?
It's a little
I
more.
don't know how to pronounce it,
So
but
if this is eSATA, then what would be this? Because now I'm confused. Is this eSATA or is this eSATA? Well, what
I
is
don't know how to pronounce it. But the third one is SCSI.
SCSI? SCSI.
SCSI?
Yeah, SCSI. That is correct. SCSI. That's the one that looks weird. It looks like a little. Oh, and there goes my geometry being challenged. I know it's not a rhombus. Trapezoid. There we go. He's the one that looks like a trapezoid. The only thing I can explain it. This one looks like a rectangle with a weird tip when you're looking at it. And then this one here is, to me though, I'm not sure. Well, yeah, it looks more like an internal SATA. Yeah. I don't know if it's external or internal. The picture's not really
It
great.
looks like an L. That's why I thought it was a
I know
SATA. 'Cause I know the SATA looks like an L.
and I think it's internal. It's not an external SATA. Any questions, doubts? Image is not really great. I think it is internal. Next one. 31. Here goes the actual little things. What do we believe on 31, number one is?
It looks like an external SATA.
Okay. Number two?
That looks like a PATA, a ribbon cable.
Correct. The connector?
ID?
IDE.
ID, yes. Then the connector on three?
That looks like.
Like a SATA.
That is correct. That's the SATA. So on the first picture, we saw the SATA, IDE, and SCSI. In this one, we saw now the eSATA cable, the IDE cable, what it looks like, and the SATA cable, what it looks like. Go to slide 32, 32, 32, 32, 32. Okay. Here is when we're getting towards RAID, and I would not even attempt to try to fit that in even 5 minutes. If I really want to give you guys the information, it should be all at the same time. Let's stop here. I'm going to be pausing to make sure that before we go to break that we all are okay.